Hello everyone, this is Jenny Danielson and the Outward Podcast. Well, I'm at LACA, which is the Los Angeles Contemporary Archive, with Hailey Loman. She's an artist and also one of the founders and nowadays the director of this archive. We will talk about what you can find here, and Hailey will mention HR, which is an institution, and there are a few other things that she will mention. I will put everything down below in the links so you can find out what it is. I hope you will enjoy the program. Thanks for listening.
Where is Bellamy Gallery? Mm-hmm. Bellamy is located at 709 North Hill Street in Chinatown.
In Chinatown.
Upstairs next to us at LACA.
Basically, I just want us to talk about LACA.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an archive.
It's an archive. It's an artist-run digital and physical repository. It's a non-circulating library, and then the archive holds artists' ephemera, so studio materials, performance, residue, things that are dropped off by artists. Therefore, they are choosing the value, and then they are inputting the descriptive metadata.
And what prompted you to start it all?
I was doing a performance at Human Resources. Eric Kim and I started the space, and I was not too pleased with the documentation of the performance. I did a 3-day performance called Cleaning Human Resources, where I cleaned the space, and the footage seemed like now I was showing a video work, and I wasn't thrilled with it. And I instead sort of started liking the 409 cleaners that we were using, like the rags that had stains on them, and wanting to show those as evidence of the performance. But then thinking, well, do I put the 409 on a pedestal? Now it's a new artwork. So I needed a space where you walk in and immediately understand that this isn't a gallery and I'm re-showing something and this is a commodifiable object. That instead it was a space that you walk in and know this is for research. This is an artifact of something I've missed that can't be redone, restaged. I know Eric had different intentions of starting LACA. He runs Human Resources, and activity was happening. It happens constantly at HR. And it was sort of like, well, what's next? Like, how is this getting recorded? How does it continue on and get looked at? Because stuff's happening constantly, and there's no record of it. And is that okay? Human Resources collection is our first collection that we started with at LACA, and it's still one of our smaller collections, which I've come to terms with in the fact that it's telling in what's absent. It shows people don't have the budget to document and archive their work. Things are happening frenetically and fast. So while it was like, it really bothered us that the HR collection was so small, now it starts to feel large in what's missing.
This HR, Human Resources, what kind of institution is that?
It's a nonprofit space.
It's a nonprofit space, and they organize performances. I think I've been there to a couple of artist talks, panel discussions.
It's a really special place. It's on Cottage Home, and maybe it's been there 8 years. Mm-hmm. It's I don't know if they identify as a collective. There's a board, and then there's a circulating programming committee. And it started at a time, I know Eric talks about it a lot, when it was this period during the recession, 2008.
Oh, yeah. And the 2008 one.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a time when getting paid things weren't professionalized. They just, having a giant space for really cheap was exciting and not there. And the name Human Resources popped up because of artists not having a human resources department to turn to. And Dawn Casper was involved, and she was super active doing performances all the time, needed a space. The building's awesome. It's an old kung fu theater. So you can see that upstairs is the projection room, and then it's just this giant cube.
Do you think it will exist, that kind of space, here in Chinatown 10 years from now?
They are getting kicked out. I don't know if you...
I knew that, actually, yeah.
Yeah. The landlords are Bach and Kiet San, and they have been threatening to... I had a studio downstairs, down below of HR, and they've been threatening to do to build a hotel, a boutique hotel for ages. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I do know that they have this eviction date.
I mean, we are in Los Angeles, and I have a feeling that things are changing quite quickly. Even I have not been here at all. You know, I've just lived here for a couple of months, and I visited a few times before, but it's something about the art scene that is changing more or less every day.
Yeah.
I see new species. Yeah, maybe that's not something we need to discuss now. What I wanted to talk about is the Los Angeles Contemporary Archive. So what is contemporary about the archive? That's something I want to talk about.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a play on words to put contemporary next to the word archive, just because I think of archives as items of the past, making projections into the future with it. So to have it be the here and now is sort of silly. But the contemporary, we started collecting in 2013, March 2013, when we opened our doors, when we were in Gebali Gallery and in their warehouse. And we wanted people to be a part of the starting of the space. So actually our shelves were empty, and it was a struggle to have people come into the space and be like, welcome to the archive. And they would say, well, where's your collection? And be like, we're building it. And it's like, well, where's the value? I mean, an archive is as valuable as its collection, and trying to make value in an idea instead, the idea of the space. So it's gotten increasingly easy to tour people around the archive now that we have a collection, but it's sort of less, it is still interesting to me. It's just a different kind of, it just changes now that it's built up. But artists are donating material. We're still in an acquisition phase. So it'll be interesting in 10 years, 20 years to call ourselves Los Angeles Contemporary Archive, and to sort of troubleshoot, is it still contemporary? Which seems like an interesting conundrum.
I'm very fascinated about how do you, when you get something and you need to put it into the lovely database you have that you can search everything, how's that process? Did you ask someone at the Getty Institute how to log things?
Yeah, so I was spending a bunch of time at the GRI with John Tain when he was there, was nice enough to let me ask a million questions. Melissa Huddleston, who's at the GRI, she's on our steering committee. I was spending a bunch of time there. Now I have stopped because it's just the Disneyland of archives. I mean, it's just, you want Mylar and there's rolls of Mylar. You want acid-free materials, there's rolls and rolls. So it's actually more helpful for me to visit these like low budget, struggling collective kind of archives, these smaller institutions, to see how people are troubleshooting. How do you work on your database when the programmer won't respond to you because he's on vacation or something and you don't have that much money? Those are challenges that I think are more interesting, like how to hack your own site. But yeah, I worked with Eric Kim and then an artist named Telef Telefson, who I saw his thesis at USC and it was a database. And so we started talking to him and we built it in Drupal, and we would have these long work sessions where we would just sort of argue over every little thing, like, well, should it be artist or author? But not everyone's an author and not everyone's an artist. And would it be plural? And then when we tell people we built it all from scratch, and every single word in the database has been discussed and critiqued and complained over. And I'm still finding things where I would love to change it, where I'm like, we didn't have a collection description. Why did we not do that? Now we know to do that. And the hard part was that we were getting artist books, so that's been really fleshed out, but we didn't have big archives or a big collection to kind of base off. So we were predicting what we would get.
That in itself is interesting.
It's really interesting. Whereas to build a database, it needs to be flexible enough. The architecture needs to be flexible enough to change with your language, your materials. It needs to be this sort of unpredictable thing, which is really fascinating to me when I'm working on building a database now. Sort of like, well, you need to predict everything, and you can't. And that's interesting.
Yeah, because ultimately you want people to be able to find what you have collected.
Yeah, and really trying to figure out who will be using it. I mean, even in just putting things on shelves, like who is looking, and I don't know who that audience maybe is yet, but trying to figure out, well, who is looking and how is the best way for them to find it. Whereas the best way for me to find it is different than who is the researcher. Mm-hmm. So who takes hierarchy is really interesting to me.
So how do you negotiate this in the physical? Shelves, dust, sunlight,
right,
all those sort of things.
Because we're contemporary archive, we don't have to do a ton of conservation work. I am starting to consider that. Right now, we have the luxury to have windows. And while we keep away from the windows and working on getting the right UV stuff for our tube bulbs or fluorescent bulbs and putting a coat on the windows and things like that, I am well aware that this space is a luxury because of how current the materials are, and there will come a time when we have to go into darkness. We have to go into a more controlled space.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe then at that point, the archive will transform into something completely different.
Yeah. I mean, we have talked a lot about if it needs to be a white glove space. When you enter, do you take off your coat? Do you have to wash your hands? We have decided that we want people to feel, rifle is a strong word, but we want people to feel a lot of the space is about making people feel comfortable and welcome when the institution can be scary or archives can be daunting, so that people feel like they can browse and flip through materials. And that takes precedence over wearing white gloves and what we would gain from materials staying safe. Mm-hmm. But we're constantly negotiating that sort of thing.
Yeah, as a researcher, I think it's phenomenal when you go into those archives where you have to put the white gloves on and it's all a bit mysterious. Mm-hmm. And then you go through something and then after a while you're like, but this is actually just a sheet of paper or old photographs. It's just actually things.
It communicates how precious the work is.
Yeah, but it's precious, but it's also just paper. And it's something very nice when... Or at least I find when you, as a researcher, kind of meet with the material and it just becomes material and not so precious anymore.
Right. Preservation is not something that really, it works, but it's just slowing down the process of things being destroyed.
Yeah,
it doesn't solve anything. So there was a time when I was really loving all the language that's just like this will last in these catalogs, these acid-free catalogs or supply stores. And it was like, this will last forever.
Yeah.
And this idea that nothing can last forever, we're just slowing it down. Mm-hmm. And how our relationship with time is when you walk into these libraries and you don't know when they started and they will never end. And then the history of libraries is also, I'm thinking of Alexander, is to light on fire. Mm-hmm. So these dramatic ends, but you don't know when they begin. And there was a time when I was looking into these sort of relationships on time and in the archive.
If you're an artist and you've made a book, let's say you made a book, it must be something nice knowing that this book will be used. Someone would actually look inside it. It will not